WhiskyCast. Brought to you by Redbreast, the definitive single pot still Irish whiskey. Those in the know Redbreast.
I've roamed and rambled, and I followed my footsteps to the sparkling sands of her diamond deserts. And all around me, a voice was sounding. This land was made for you and me.
I don't think anyone can stand back and say that they know everything about Irish whiskey because there is so much to learn.
Carol Quinn's job is cataloguing more than 2 centuries of Irish whiskey history. And after 5 years as the archivist for Irish Distillers, she's barely scratched the surface.
When the 3 historic distilleries that had formed Irish Distillers back in 1966, you had John Jameson and Son in Dublin, John Power and Son in Dublin, and the Cork Distilleries Company here in Cork, which ran Midleton. And those 3 companies merged in 1966. And in 1975, production was brought down here to a new site in Midleton. And the old distilleries in Dublin were closed. But because they had both been in existence since the 18th century, all the historic records were still in situ. Now, at the time, the company didn't have any resources. Funds were really tight, but they knew this was important. So what they did is they actually boxed up all that material, which was 40 pallets worth of material, and they gave it for storage into the National Archives in Dublin to keep it safe until such a time would come that the company would have the resources to put into building a proper archive.
The archive is located inside the old Distillers House at Midleton, with 5 specially designed storerooms built to museum-level standards. It has everything from John Jameson Jr.'s original recipe book from the Bow Street Distillery in Dublin to the start of distilling in Midleton.
This is the barley purchase book for the company of James Murphy and Co., which set up the Midleton Distillery in 1825. And you see here, this is the first purchase of barley that went into the making of Midleton whiskey.
But there's more to history than just facts and figures. There are the stories that go along with them, of the people who made whiskey their life's work and left some of those stories hidden in plain sight on these pages.
Midleton Distillery was founded by the Murphy brothers, and they were merchants from Cork City, and they had been involved in the international tea trade. So there were people with a world vision. There were people who understood luxury, there were people who understood commerce, and they had a trading network. But, you know, who were they and what did they look like? And in this book, which is quite simply an account book, and it deals with a lot of their tea importations, somebody has taken the time to doodle. And they've actually drawn a doodle of James Murphy, the founder of Midleton Distillery. And we can see here, he's a man who likes to smoke a pipe.
Distilleries were often the largest employers in most Irish towns, and next to the churches, the ones most likely to keep detailed records. A lot of church records have been lost over the years, making these archives even more important to historians.
Recorded there are the histories of individuals, people whose lives aren't recorded in any other medium. There's no birth cert for them, there's no death cert for them. The only record we have of them living and dying is in the wage books from the distilleries. So from the human point of view, it was hugely important that they kept those records.
Carol Quinn describes the Old Midleton Distillery as Ireland's largest urban archaeological site. Many of the buildings here date back more than a century, and they help put some of the stories in those old ledgers into context.
This is from 1811, and this has actually come from the Watercourse Distillery in Cork City, which merged with Midleton in the 1960s to form the Cork Distilleries Company. And recorded in this book is the amount paid to farmers who were bringing their barley and their grains to the distillery. And how that worked is that you would bring them in, they would get weighed, you would get given a chit of paper, you would bring that paper then to the office, and you would slide in your paper, and there would be a clerk sitting on a high stool inside the window, and he would slide out to the farmer the money that was due to him. And so all that clerk would see going past his window is heads of farmers. And here in 1811 we actually have a doodle, and it's called Shy Farmers, and it's the heads of those farmers as witnessed by the clerk at the distillery as they walked by the window in 1811. Isn't that incredible? But what I can show you through the window here is what that office would have looked like. And you can see here the red brick building at Old Middleton. That was the public office. And you can see there the bottom left-hand side window has bars across the bottom. And it's inside that window that the clerk would have sat. And the farmers would have slipped in their chit, and the money would have come back out to them. So you can see exactly, he would have just seen the heads going past the window.
While it'll take Carol Quinn many more years to completely catalog the collection, the archive is already paying off its investment.
So we're just going down the corridor to what's known as the liquid library.
That's right. There are more than just old books, documents, and photos.
Come on in.
And this is a whiskey lover's dream.
Very few people come in here, Mark, now, so it's a pleasure to have you and to have your viewers. And what we try and do here is we keep a copy of everything produced by Irish distillers.
The historical bottle and label designs in this room are helping inspire the designers for today's whiskies.
You'll see some of the older editions of Jameson, and these all date from a time when Jameson preferred to sell its whiskey in bulk by the barrel to the publicans or the bonders, who would then bottle it themselves, and the distillery would supply the labels. But the problem is that you'd have somebody going into the bar and they're faced with all of this, and what is the drink they like, which is their favourite. It's pretty much all the same whiskey, but you know, it was confusing. So in 1963 Jameson decided for once and for all to bottle in-house in Bow Street, and what they did is they produced what was called Jameson 10. And it's gone through a number of reiterations, and it was relaunched last year as Crested. From Jameson 10, it became known as Crested 10, and it's now known as Crested. And it was the very first whiskey bottled in-house by Jameson. And you can see in the latest bottling, it's harked back to the earlier days when Jameson was in fact in a clear bottle. So the designers would have begun their journey in designing the new packaging for Crested by looking back at our history and working forward then from that.
Another example, Middleton's new Method and Madness range of whiskies. Look at the similarities between the single grain edition's label and the pattern on the old Watercourse Distillery Ledger's cover. The archive is also a source of liquid samples that Middleton's whiskey makers can analyze in the distillery's lab, using instruments that were just a fantasy to the distillers who made these whiskeys decades ago. But while the bottles themselves will never leave this room, we can't stay here for long.
And you can see here in this strong room, there's no exterior light, there's no outdoor sunlight allowed in. The lighting on the ceiling here has UV filters, so it's not going to fade the labels. When we came in, we turned on the light. Normally everything sits here in darkness. I almost call it suspended animation, really. So it's all about preserving. And that's why we don't normally bring visitors in here, because even you and I standing here now, we're actually raising the humidity with our own breath. So it's not something that ever could be a visitor attraction. It's an archive. It is somewhere that something is preserved.
And that's a job Carol Quinn takes seriously.
Of course, not every distillery has the budget for a full-fledged archive like Irish Distillers does, but Carol Quinn says even small artisan distillers can benefit from keeping an archive. You never know. That small distillery might turn out to be the next John Jameson and Sons in a couple of hundred years, and somebody's going to want a piece of that history around. For more Cask-Strength conversation on whiskeys with the people who make them, the people who drink them, and the people who save the stories of whiskeys, join us each week for WhiskyCast. In Middleton, Ireland, I'm Mark Gillespie.